What if you didn't wake up to Michael Jackson's Beat It one day? What if Adele's Hello never happened? What if you did not listen to Katy Perry's The One That Got Away just when you needed to? And what if you two did not create City of Blinding Lights? The world would simply be a lesser happy place if we did not have musicians. And while music has this extraordinary power to make us feel different things, it is perhaps one of the most underrated art form ever. Half-step rock has been tracking the now rebounding global music industry in the quest of getting to the bottom of how we can see a brighter future for pop, rock, jazz, blues, country, and our musicians. We try and reach out to musicians from different parts of the world, learning about the challenges of making a career out of their only passion, music, and their lives as musicians. We started this year with one such American folk rock band from Dallas, Texas, The Fox and the Bird. The band started by Dan Bowman, Jacob Metcalf, and Paul Grass in 2008 out of their living room in Dallas, has collaborated with over 15 incredible artists until now. In an exclusive interview with Half-Step Rock, Dan Bowman and Jacob Metcalf, the lead singers of the band, opened up about their upcoming album, current band lineup, initial days of the band, life as musicians, and more. The band was also voted as the Best Folk Act of 2013 Music Awards Dallas. Music emanates from our homes and streets all day long, and yet thousands of musicians struggle to make a basic living in different parts of the world. How is that someone who creates an art that perhaps is such an integral part of our daily lives struggles to sustain a living and fails much before his dream actually comes true? Just when we pose these thought-provoking questions to Dan Bowman and Jacob Metcalf, their overwhelming responses and stories made us wonder, what would the world really be like if we did not have musicians?
I think this is a very complex issue,
Yeah.
but I think we can narrow it down to a couple of different factors. One of which is the amount of musicians currently trying to make a living. I think we've seen an explosion in the population of people trying to make a living with the music. And I think gone are the days of the big billboard artist. You know, before the internet, I mean, this is common knowledge, I think, but I think it deserves to be said. There were gatekeepers that, you know, the labels, the people who, the executives that really put all these millions of dollars into marketing artists. Those, while those still exist, I think it has changed as we've seen this explosion in the population of people trying to create music and do it vocationally. But it is my opinion that you can make a career out of music, and anyone can do it. It takes a lot of hard work. I think what we have to say goodbye to is the idea that everyone can be a rock star and play in a stadium, sell out 8 nights of Madison Square Garden in New York City. I think those days are behind us for the vast majority of working musicians. And I think that's okay. Probably the more complicated thing that I think is happening right now, I think the wealth gap is continuing to widen between the working class and those in the upper class.
I think it just depends on where you live, but I think that I can only speak for kind of here in Texas in the United States, but I feel like there's a growing population of people that aren't as engaged and thoughtful about the kind of music they're consuming. So they they don't go seek out good music, but they're willing to be fed what they hear on the radio or what tops the charts to some extent. So it's a little unbalanced where we're just not we're not valuing music. I think as at least for us as a country, we don't say this is a worthwhile endeavor that we want to pay money for. And I think there are a lot of people that do, but I think that right now, until we as a country and as a world say being an artist and being a musician is a field that is worthwhile and that I'm willing to pay for, and not like something cute that artists do, and that we value that the way we value a computer scientist or the way we value an engineer, different but still valuable and contributing to society. I think we have to kind of solve that value. We have to convince the world that there's value there, because what would the world be like if you didn't have musicians, especially independent musicians like what Jacob is doing? I think we would see, I think, a decline in people's happiness, because that's what, for me, when I come home and I turn on my turn on my Sonos and listen to music from these musicians all around the world that I love, that's what brightens my day. And I think we need to put the value where it belongs. But
I think
that's my thought on it.
that's very well said. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, the people are waking up to music, they're driving to music, they're working out to music, they go and sit down at a dinner date, and there's music in the restaurant bar. I think people put on music to calm themselves after work. It's literally in every part of our lives, which I think is why it's become invisible. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're consuming it at every stop in the day. Maybe we need to create some space, and then we'd see the value of music again.
And when music is just everywhere, and you just turn on your phone and you push play, and we're not having to pay for it as much because we're streaming it. I mean, just think about it. If you go out to a restaurant and the food, it doesn't cost anything, then you start to think the food isn't worth anything. And I think it could be the same with music, where implicitly every time we stream something, it doesn't cost us. And I just think we assign value to it, and we're lowering that value. Well, I'll let Jacob talk some about this, but I guess just to start off, I think when we formed our band, it was a really special time in Dallas music, where a lot of us were playing actually in these off the beaten path venues, these house shows like the Annex House and the Victor Munger House, where bands were coming together, and it wasn't necessarily a promoter putting the show together, but it was just the people putting it, and you'd have hundreds of people at these kind of underground shows, which was that's when we met a lot of our good friends, and the band was forming. But I just think Dallas and Dallas-Fort Worth, the whole area, sometimes doesn't get as much credit as it deserves, because there's some really talented, amazing bands coming out of Dallas and out of Fort Worth, and also out of Denton, which is where the University of North Texas is, just north of here. And Denton is just a hotbed for amazing artists like our friend Daniel Markham and others out there that are coming from Denton. Of course, we've turned out big acts like, Leon Bridges, is from Fort Worth, and there's a guy named Charlie Crockett that's doing real well here. I think it's a very supportive community. But Jacob, what's your take on
it? I love the scene. I think it's thriving, and one of my favorite parts of the job, I just completed a 15,000 mile, I guess it'd be 24,000 kilometer coast to coast tour here in the United States, and I played all over Canada and both coasts. And I got a chance to play with Dan for some of those, and Bill flew out for one. And my favorite part about the job, by far, is that I get to see night after night musicians in tiny towns all over the country who are really doing something remarkable. And I feel so fortunate to be able to witness that as someone who's traveling as a musician and someone who considers himself as a music lover first and a music maker second. I think the scenes are thriving all over the country, and people have this DIY, get it done attitude. And if we could peel back a layer, I think people are making art in response to the stress of everyday living. I mean, 21st century living in a lot of ways is really a lot easier than it ever has been. I mean, we talk about this. When we sit down to dinner at a restaurant, for instance, we're eating food that only sultans and diplomats 400 years ago would have had access to food like this. But we can sit down to ramen and have, you know, the finest cuisine from 6 oceans brought to our table. And I think in some ways we're living in the finest luxury we've ever had. But in other ways, I think 21st century living is really hard. And it has to do with all the technology that kind of brings us together, but also forces a wedge between us. And I think the artists are making this art in response to the stress and strain of living, which may not have been your original question, but in a roundabout way, it's just I think people are making beautiful things in response to the ugliness they see in the world.
And if I can brag on Jacob for just a minute, one thing I thought was pretty neat is, as an artist, you always got to think about ways to engage with your fans. And a few weeks ago, Jacob actually put out a playlist of music. It was around Thanksgiving. It was music he was thankful for. And it was, as I scanned through this, I don't know, there must have been 60, 70, 80 songs on there. And they were all artists that Jacob has played with, for the most part, across the country. Artists that would be so hard to find if you were just looking for good music. And I had so many of our friends here in Dallas that were playing that list and just said, this is so good. I would never have discovered these artists. So instead of self-promoting himself, he was able to keep himself engaged with his fans by sharing music from all these small artists from across the country. And I just thought that was a really cool way to do it. So